gentlemen, thank you for joining ChasingCinema.com's official podcast. This is our 136th episode. If this is the first time that you are listening, then you are 136 episodes late, but that's okay. We forgive you because we are glad you're here now. Make sure to hit the subscribe button on iTunes. That way, each week our podcast comes to you straight. Each week on Sunday/Monday, depending on when we publish, comes to your iTunes already automatically. You don't have to do anything, or you could just subscribe to our YouTube channel where our podcast episodes also air. Let me introduce myself. My name is Jacob Toronto, and I'm joined today by a great friend and someone that has been podcasting with me all month long. I know people are asking a lot about Louis. Louis is doing great, but he is trying to be a doctor, so he helps when he can. He does what he can. He'll always be a part of Chasing Cinema. But right now, Michael's been a great help and a really great guest for us on the podcast because he's been seeing a lot where Louis has been so busy trying to become, one of those guys that walk around in a white jacket. That he's mighty busy. But today I've joined me Michael Smith. Michael, how are you, good sir?
I am fine. Thank you very much. Thank you for having me back.
I know.
And thank Louis for taking a break.
Yeah, right? So, and it's good. We get some different opinions on here, you guys. It's always nice to see. But don't worry, Louis isn't gone. I've got some tweets like, where's Louis? Don't worry, he is fine. He is safe. You'll probably hear from him very soon enough. But I will tell you guys that we also have another guest coming back next week. As me and Michael both will be talking about the movies coming out on Christmas, we are going to be joined by Josh Bell. We all know who's been on a few times, and we also get along great, though me and Josh rarely agree when it comes to movies, at least the ones that we've been talking about on the podcast. So that's great. We still love Josh, and glad he's coming as well. The way this podcast is going to work, we know earlier this week we released a bonus episode of a podcast because there's been a lot of controversy and talk about the new film, the interview that Sony had pulled. If you don't know what's going on with the interview, go back an episode of our podcast and we talked about it. We had to do a bonus episode because we had to do it in the middle of the week where we usually record on Sunday or we'll at least publish on Sunday. So today, because there's been so many films coming out this week and next week, all we're going to be doing is reviewing films. We usually do movie reviews and what we've been watching and movie news. But today and next week, since there's so many films coming out, I believe 5 films per week, that's all we're going to really be doing because we're so just kind of caught up on everything. So this week, we're going to be reviewing Annie, Foxcatcher, Wild, The Hobbit, The Battle of the Five Armies, and Night at the Museum, Secret of the Tomb. So we have a lot to talk about. Michael, again, thank you for joining us. What do you want to talk about first?
Well, can I just say that right off the bat, the one film we won't be talking about is The Interview because Sony bottled it. But we had that conversation, but that would have been on here as well.
Yes, next week.
If they hadn't totally fallen all over their own sword to stop putting the film out for the public to see. But there you go. Yeah, I'm quite excited for all the other films that are coming out that we are going to be talking about, though.
Yeah, and it looks like Hollywood is not very happy with this choice of Sony, and they've been getting a lot of bad feedback. And today, we're recording this a little bit early, too. But today I read an article on BuzzFeed where an email from an unnamed Sony producer argued that they should not have black actors as leads because the international audience are racist. So, I mean, I feel so bad for Sony because this is just getting worse and worse. And to be honest, I am actually questioning if they'll even survive this. I mean, they're already reaching because their only real property is Spider-Man.
Yeah. And it's funny that you say that because I was sitting there thinking yesterday when we were talking about the whole debacle of what's been going on, that wouldn't it be odd if this was the thing that broke Sony, that just totally took them out of the business. I mean, that's a huge $42 million, and they're sitting there going, we may never release this film.
Yeah, and it's going to. And $42 million was just the budget of the film that, they're probably going to lose a lot more on top of that. I believe I was reading an article that said they're probably going to end up losing at least $110 million over this.
Yeah.
And then it leaked today. The ending of the film leaked today online. There wasn't video of it, but there was actually people telling about how the film resolves itself.
Yeah.
And I was also I'm just like, after that article, I read about the whole, we shouldn't have black actors in leads and and them wanting to reboot Spider-Man for the third time, it just looks like Sony is in really big trouble right now, and it does not look good for them at all right now. So it's kind of like, I don't know, all we can do is sit back and watch.
Unbelievable. Jeez.
And then it's not even Christmas yet. So, and supposedly they're supposed to get a great Christmas gift. So I have no idea. And all I can do is just say, sorry, but at the same time, they did say these things. They did insult a lot of actors and actresses. They did say a lot of things that they shouldn't have, and now it's kind of biting them on the butt. So,
well, it should also be pointed out that Sony are not the only studios that feel this way.
Absolutely,
it has always been. Hollywood has never liked the talent. They never have.
Yeah.
And the more powerful the talent get, the less the studios like it, because they can make more demands. They can actually ask for a little bit of integrity in parts that they play. They don't have to do these, regurgitated rubbish that Hollywood likes to do so much, called remakes, that they do over and over again. And it's like, we all know that. It's just Sony got caught because they pissed off the North Koreans.
Exactly. They got the caught with their pants down.
Exactly.
But moving on, let's talk about since The Hobbit is already out, let's address that film. The third film in the Hobbit trilogy, The Hobbit Battle of Five Armies, released this Wednesday, the same day that we reviewed, we did our podcast on the interview. So, Michael, talk about how you feel about The Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings franchise and Peter Jackson in general.
It's one of those things where it's, thank God it's over. This has taken a long time to finally tell everything he could possibly tell. And thank God J.R.R., Tolkien didn't write anything else apart from The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. Otherwise, Peter Jackson would be making those as well. The films were fantastic. The films were great. But it's like, we had, 3 Ring films, did we not? And we had 3 Hobbit films. And it's like, okay, let's give the orcs a rest for a little while. As much as I enjoyed the last film, and I did enjoy the last film, it was interesting and entertaining. But, as I said in my review, I thought the best part of the film was at the beginning, and it never really matched back up to that after that point. So, it's in my mind, and it's going to get lots of people not like me, but my thing is, thank God it's over.
My experiences with the Lord of the Rings series hasn't been super intimate. I know a lot of good people love that trilogy, and just really big fans of the whole Middle Earth thing. And I've never been a person who's kind of into the whole Middle Earth type dwarf and elves and things of that nature. And I'm not knocking it either, because I'm all about certain things that I'm sure people make fun of me, i.e. pro wrestling. I get made fun of for liking pro wrestling all the time. Everyone has their own thing. But I appreciate Lord of the Rings for what it is. It is a great example of wonderful filmmaking and of the technical aspects that the filmmaking has come to. But I will say I was really enjoying the Hobbit trilogy. I really loved An Unexpected Journey because I felt like I was really going on part of an adventure, and I was just really excited of the kind of the fresh start. I really particularly loved the Andy Serkis interaction as Gollum with the Hobbit. And then in the second film, his interaction with Smaug. I think those were really pivotal moments in the films for me. They were, if you think about it, they were 15, 20-minute scenes of just dialogue between two characters, but their connection and their chemistry was so strong. In one we have, Gollum, who is the Hobbit is trying to outsmart, and then we have we have Smaug, which he's also trying to outsmart, but also very fearful of, rather than a little bit more confident. And I really, really enjoyed both those scenes, and which I really helped me enjoy these films. This film kind of takes a turn where I was really not very interested in what was going on. I feel that there wasn't really any strong emotion except for the first scene, what Michael already mentioned, when Smaug has to face Thorin. I think Thorin was the only part of the movie that I actually really enjoyed because he was the only character that went through some change. He was the only character that was going through a struggle, and he had some really great moments. Most of the movie is about him becoming, a little overpowered by this gold and the treasure while he was looking for the Arkenstone, and he's kind of like to the point where he doesn't even care if a war starts. So I appreciated that part of the film, but overall, I think one of the major drawbacks was this 45, 50-minute action sequence. Because though I know a lot of people will love that, now I think it's also a reason people are going to go see this movie.
Yeah.
To me, it just kind of really got old very quickly. I think I was over in the first 10, 15 minutes. I just think, I don't need a very long action sequence. I know it's a build up to something, but I didn't need that long of a drawn out thing. And, I feel like even in that, I think the action sequence wasn't superb either. I don't think it was over amazing where I was like so into it that I didn't care to look away. It was like, all right, I get it. I felt very, there's a real dragged out scene with O'Connelly. I thought it was kind of like just dragged out. And I think it was I thought it was an okay film. But it was my least favorite of the trilogy. I think a lot of people are on the fence about it, as I think it's sitting at a 60-50% on Rotten Tomatoes. And I just don't think it lived up to the hype. And I don't, to me, it wasn't the most satisfactory conclusion, but I think it's time to kind of put it at rest. Even though Peter Jackson has stated he might revisit Middle-earth again in the near future.
Heavens help us all. But it's that sort of thing, at the very beginning when the dragon, aka, Benedict Cumberbatch,
of course,
was destroying the village, and the bowman, was facing him off, and the kids running up. It was all, suspenseful and a lot of, great one force against another, and it was really, really good. By the time you finally got to the fight, it was, you knew Thorin was either going to sit there and watch the whole thing and watch everybody die, or at the last minute he was going to give it up and go out and help. It was only going to be one or two things happen. Mm-hmm. The actual battle itself was not as impressive as battles in the first films, because we've all seen this before. We've all seen big battles in the verse before. And I remember saying after the film was over with, and I think I said the other day on another one of the podcasts, I got really excited when they dropped the giant bears in. Yes. That was the only bit of the battle I got the big kick out of, was when the big eagles came and dropped the big bears in. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh, this is so cool, because that was one of the things I remembered from the book. But the rest of it was just like, it's interesting, but and to be really honest, as much as I like Martin Freeman and I loved him in Fargo and so on and so forth, he's not my favorite actor in the world. He's not my favorite comic actor in the world. And I think it's quite possibly because I saw him on a lot of British television, and he is funny, but it's one of those where he has a catalog of looks. I remember, I don't know if you've ever seen it in this country or not. There's a show called Never Mind the Buzzcocks. Have you ever seen that over here?
I don't know if it's out here, but I know I've never heard of it.
Okay, it's a very English thing. They get these very funny people on there. Bill Bailey's always on there, and you probably have never heard of him. He's a very English guy. And there's another chap. And they have all these people on from all over the world, mostly English, though, that are in the rock world and or are very funny and actors and stuff. And I remember Martin Freeman being on there. And it's basically one of these gag shows where they ask silly questions, and you come up with answers to it. Or they'll ask topical questions and come up with answers or whatever. And Martin Freeman was explaining the different looks he does for things. He was like, if somebody says something, I'll lift one eyebrow. And if somebody says something, I'll lift the other eyebrow. And then if it's something else, they say, I'll lower one eyebrow. And he does all these things, and they do make him look really hysterically funny. And that really is his repertoire as an actor, for a comic actor. It was the looks he gets on his face. He never really felt to me like a young Sir Ian Holm. He never did. He didn't feel like a young Bilbo Baggins. Just never really felt that way to me. He's good. He's a great Hobbit. I think he's fantastic, but he never really sold me. And I think that's probably the other big reason I never really got that excited about the Hobbit, because he doesn't do that much for me. Mm-hmm. Sorry, Martin. I loved you at Fargo.
Yeah, I don't think I was really in love with any of these characters, or really was super invested more than I was super invested in the story. And, a lot of people have criticized this man for turning this real, I don't know how big of a book, but a fairly small book into a essentially 9-hour, trilogy.
Yes.
And, I can understand that. And I honestly feel that it could have been, it might have worked better if they only did 2 movies. I would have, I just I also know, as we kind of talked about with Wes Anderson recently, I don't whatever our conversation, I think it was when we were talking about the Golden Globes, that this movie, I mean, though I enjoy it and I think that they are well made, that this movie has a target audience that will probably appreciate things in it more than I.
Yes,
but I honestly feel this was its weakest punch, and I don't think I'm alone in thinking that. No. And fan or not, I think you'll feel that it's kind of a very weak last effort, if you will.
Anticlimactic, I think, is a perfect phrase for it. Very anticlimactic. It wasn't what I thought it was going to be at all.
No, and I think, I mean, I don't want to spoil things or really kind of go into detail, but I think when we get to the very end of the resolution, and it's the aftermath of the war and everything like that, and I just think it kind of goes in this weird little comedy type, where it's not really funny. I don't know. I think this movie is kind of very confused. It hit it right on the head, like we said, when Thorin is fighting Smaug. When there's an incredible moment with his son gets involved, and there's a lot of emotion. But I think this movie tried to be very funny in a lot of aspects, and it wasn't funny at all. I know one character even got Michael pretty annoyed, who tried to be the comic relief in the picture.
Yes, he was very annoying, and it's not Thorin that's fighting Smaug. It's the bowman.
Oh yes, you're right.
What's his bloody name? What's the character? Bifur?
Yeah.
Yes, Bifur. Yeah. Yeah, because Thorin's too busy trying to get out.
Yes, you're right.
They're slightly ahead because Bifur winds up staying behind and helping the villagers, recover from Smaug's, death.
Yeah, you're right. Thank you.
I'm trying not to give too much away. But
But overall, obviously, me and Mike weren't too crazy about it, but I know people are going to go see it. It's probably going to be one of the biggest, highest-grossing films of the year. But I will be kind of, me and Louis joked a lot because Louis usually does reviews for The Hobbit, but this year he was not able to. That it's kind of our over the hump. After we hit The Hobbit, we know it's all kind of going downhill into the good stuff, and the year's coming to a close. But I won't be. Let's just say I won't be too disappointed that I won't be reviewing another Hobbit film next year.
Yeah, and suffice to say, if you're one of those people like the folks we saw at the cinema when we went to go see the film that like dressing up in Dungeon and Dragon type outfits and slapping the crap out of each other with pretend swords, you'll probably love it like they did.
Absolutely. I think there are people going to love this no matter what we say. But if you are looking at it from just an unbiased point of view and someone that doesn't, that isn't, you probably will see us to win. But I think even people of culture and people who really love the Renaissance, or even pre-Renaissance, I guess, will kind of see some issues with it. Moving on, we have a film that is another third of a trilogy, and that is The Night at the Museum, Secret of the Tomb, which is the conclusion of the trilogy in the Sean Levy comedy / adventure movies, where Ben Stiller plays Larry, a night guard at a museum, and he finds out that the creatures and statues and all that fun stuff come to life at night. Michael, how do you feel about the first two Night at the Museums, and what were you expecting going into this picture?
Well, I have to say that I loved the first film so much and carried on about it so much after I went to go see it with my daughter at the cinema that my birthday present that year was the special edition DVD when it was released. And I absolutely adored the first one. The second one, I never bothered to watch because it was one of those things where when you see a film that you think is absolutely perfect and you see that they've come back and went, we're going to make a sequel. And you're like, no, don't do that. You're going to really spoil everything because it all fit within that first hour and a half, or nowadays 2.5 hours of cinema magic. Mm-hmm. Don't go back there again. You're going to mess it up. So I never watched the second one. I think another reason why I never watched it was they spent an awful lot of time in the trailers anyway, in the marketing campaign of showing a lot of Ricky Gervais. I don't like Ricky Gervais.
I was going to ask you that when we got out of the third film. Yeah. Because I know he's one of the most referenced, United Kingdom comedians out here, and yes. I wanted to get your opinion.
Yeah, cannot stand the man. It's not to say that I don't think he's wildly talented. His television show, Extras, showed just how much genius he has as a writer. I just don't think he's that bloody funny as a comic. Sorry, I think his writing skills are bar none. but I don't think he's that funny. Every once in a great blue moon, he'll do something that really tickles me. But more often than not, he comes across as this egotistical, pompous ass that I cannot stand the sight of when I see him, unless he's in something as a character like The Office or, Extras, which just to me was absolutely brilliant. But overall, I don't particularly care for him. I don't like him. He gets on my nerves when I see him. So it's like, no, I wasn't too overly pleased. And all the marketing for the second one, if I remember correctly, had an awful lot of Gervais in it. And I'm like, no, sorry, you're spoiling it. You're giving him way too much to do. Cut him out of the film. Kill him. Do something with his character. So he didn't show up. So I missed the second one by choice. And so we go to see this one. And by this point in time, I don't remember who I said this to. I might even have said it to you. To me, it looked like even Ben Stiller was tired of being there. He was bored with it. He didn't want to be there, but it's like, hey, you know what? They asked me back for a third time. Yeah, why not? I'll do it. And it was just that sort of thing where it wasn't as clever. Someone else had said, and I agree, that they felt it was aimed more towards children, and it was. It was a lot. I noticed that the cinema we saw it in was a lot of small children, and not one of them was being grumpy, asking, I want a drink of water, I want to go to the toilet, I want more popcorn. No, they were watching and laughing at the film. So it was very much set up for younger people. But the cleverness was gone. The excitement of the whole thing was gone. It felt like, yes, sort of what I said with The Hobbit, thank God this is all over. We're not going to have to visit this again. And I've got a gut feeling just by looking at the way the film ended that if it ever does come back, it will not have Ben Stiller. It will probably have Ricky Bloody Gervais in it as the main character, and
or Rebel Wilson.
Or, oh, God.
Uh-oh.
The less said about her, the better. Uh-oh. Where they found this. And that's the other thing. It creases me up. And again, it's typical Hollywood. She's playing a Brit. She's a British guard at the British Museum of Natural History, and she's Australian. Couldn't you have found a British actress? And the British actress that wasn't Rebel Wilson? Not asking a lot, but then these are the same people that think Ricky Gervais is a hoot. So, what are you going to do?
I actually am an admitted Rebel Wilson fan, but lo and behold. So, no. Okay, so I am someone who absolutely, loves imagination. I love going into creative worlds and seeing things that I've never seen before, and I think that, sometimes goes out to people like Louis. We have joked many times that the kid in Louis has died, and he only likes things that are real and could possibly happen. He doesn't like fantasy and kid stuff. Where I love going into different worlds and seeing things come alive like that. And literally, in this movie, came alive. So watching the first night at the museum, I thought I was absolutely going to love the picture. And though I didn't mind it, it wasn't my favorite like it was Michael's, but I didn't hate it either. I thought that it was very clever. I thought it was kind of interesting, though it never really got to me. It never really connected and hit its mark with me. And though I don't know if it was the fault of Ben Stiller, because Ben Stiller does have this tone of comedy that kind of follows him, and I don't know if it was meant for this. And if this film, let's say, was led by someone else, it would have had a completely different feel. And I'm not saying for the better or for the worse. I mean, it all kind of depends. But there was something that just didn't connect with me in the first film. I very poorly remember the second film, but what I do remember is that there was a lowering status of humor, and it kind of dropped down to that just dumb, kind of not clever type of humor that reappears in this movie. And I know, and as we pointed out, we talked to the same person that said, it kind of is aimed more towards children. I agree with that, but at the same time, I think it's just immature, not so much children, but just immature stuff. Where I even mentioned in my review, very, very I don't mean to be that harsh, but I mean where there's a character where a monkey pees on our main characters. is one of the biggest heightened laughs of the film, and it got a kick out of the kids in the theater. But to me, I'm just not a fan of Twilight humor. I don't think it's ever really necessary to kind of have like that to me, and that to me is just a disconnect. For other people, it makes them laugh. I know grown men who still laugh at flatulence and toilet humor, and grown adults, but it doesn't work for me. And to me, it's always kind of a big turnoff where you gotta really uncreative. And interestingly enough, when we arrive at the British Museum with Ben Stiller and the gang, I was very excited because now we get to see this other museum come to life. All these things in this museum that could come alive and be extraordinarily interesting and all that stuff. And that's my favorite part of Night at the Museum trilogy at all, is just the fact that we get all these really interesting and cool type things come alive. I thought it was kind of a disappointment. Instead of really being creative, they kind of rehash everything that happens in the first museum. We have a dinosaur skeleton, which, doing research for this, I know this was the Night at the Museum was actually a children's book, where there wasn't statuettes or anything, but there was skeleton twins, and our dinosaur skeletons, not skeleton twins. I don't know why I said that.
Bill Hayden and Christopher. Yeah.
But they're dinosaur skeletons in the museum that come alive, and that's it. So I know that's in the museum, but to me, it just kind of went in that exact same direction, where to me it was just like, eh. And then there was another character in the film that I just really was turned off by, and that was played by Ben Stiller himself, as he played a caveman that looks exactly like him. I don't know. I felt, I always never liked calling humor dumb or dumb humor, but it's definitely an immature, not very clever or witty humor that, as Michael pointed out, is in the first film, where it's a little bit more clever, a little bit more, reserved. It doesn't go for the cheap laughs, where I feel this film does go for those cheap laughs. And
it also had, and I was going to say this as well, on the night, because I remember watching the film, and when it ended, and they found out what the problem was they had to resolve for everything to go back to normal, quote unquote normal, the plot made no sense. Yeah. The storyline in this is it brings everything back full circle. Mm-hmm. And you find out the characters that were in the first film are actually, were characters as children in this film. And basically they find this golden tablet, which if anyone's watched the film, they know the golden tablet is what makes all the exhibits come to life. And in this film, the golden tablet is breaking for all intents and purposes. It's falling to pieces. It's stopping working properly. And at the beginning of the film, they go, when they find the tablet, all the Egyptian people are like, no, sorry, you're bringing about the end. Everything's going to end. And you're like, okay. Now, a millennia later, 2, 3, 4, 5 decades later, the thing suddenly stops working. And the minute it stops working, the character at the beginning of the film goes, well, that's what they said. They said, when we grabbed it, it would be ending. Yeah, 50 years later it's now ending? The plot made no sense.
Well, I don't even think it was the problem that it would happen so long later. But I'll mention spoilers in a second. But help me through this. Was the tablet the thing that gave them power in the first film?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
so I thought the tablet for some reason was introduced in the second film,
but it also in the first film helped Dick Van Dyke and Mickey Rooney and Bill Cobbs all stay a lot younger, because every time the tablet geared up, it made them all really like woohoo, hey,
And okay, so spoiler alert: if you really care about how this movie turns out or how this movie comes to a resolution, fast forward about 2 minutes, because me and Matt are going to get into it right now. Again, spoiler alert. And then the most unclimatic resolution. Yeah. In the sense that you have to make them all face the right way.
Yes.
Like that's what happened. That's what you got to do. You just got to do
you got to do it in the moonlight. You got to get them all facing the right way, and it's got to be in the moonlight.
Yes.
And this is the other thing. All right. I lived in England for 31 years. The chances of you actually getting bloody moonlight on any given point in time. It's not. It could be clouds. Like, they had some clouds there, but no. Sorry, mate. It's not going to happen. Probably every one of them died because there was no moon.
But, to me, that just sounded like so... Okay. Like, that was it. You just got to put them together in the moonlight, And it was just like, all right. So, to me, that part was just kind of really disappointing. But I will say, at the end of the film, there is a moment when our characters are meeting near doom, and our monkey character kind of has a departing moment. And I was like, oh... Like, you could hear a pin drop in that theater when that happened.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, damn, this is getting real. And that moment where that monkey's hand kind of falls, it is very, very, very emotional.
Yeah.
But, you know, we all know how this kind of movie is going to end, and we all know what's going to happen. But I think that scene and the scene when the monkey is saying his goodbyes is pretty beautiful. But that's just because I'm an animal lover.
And I liked Hugh Jackman.
Yes, and I was about to say my favorite part of the entire film and the addition of the cast. You know, we have all these new creatures, all these new statues. No, the best part of this movie is this little side joke they have when everyone runs into Hugh Jackman playing himself in a play, and when he makes fun of his Wolverine self. I thought it was absolutely hilarious. It was probably the only part that got genuine laughs out of me in this movie. Also, you know, me and Michael have talked about this kind of thing before. You know, the movie has a different feeling, and I think people are going to go see this movie, obviously, because a lot of people are crediting it as one of Robin Williams' last films.
Yes.
And there is a feeling you get while watching him. And, you know, it kind of always goes to that thing where you watch someone who's recently passed away die, and they're saying things, and it's like, wow, I mean, it just kind of makes everything a little bit more special. And there's a feeling watching him. But at the same time, you know, as someone who watches films and really care, you know, though his passing has even affected us. We did a whole podcast about it. I absolutely love the man. I think he's a very talented actor. That I can't look at that and say that improves this movie. I can't say just because he passed, I could look at this film less or more. I can't say that. Though I think his character has a really beautiful moment with Ben Stiller towards the end of the film. And I think it is the only scene that really gave me heart and gave me real emotions throughout the whole entire trilogy, and it's in their one of their last scenes, and I really, really love that. So
I know the one you mean, yeah. And I agree. That was the only bit in the film I felt that Williams came alive.
Yes,
and actually, because in the first film, he made me believe, right up until he actually says in the first film, that I'm not, you know, Teddy Roosevelt. I'm a wax thingy.
Yeah.
You know, I know all this stuff because I read it in the library. But he had a life to him. He made you feel like, you know, if anybody could be Teddy Roosevelt, he could, you know, and he kind of embodied it. And in the film that we saw the other night, it was like, it's probably just me, but I felt like Williams looked kind of like Ben Stiller, a little bit tired, a little bit fed up with playing this character again. He didn't have that spark. Mm-hmm. And in that one particular scene where he's talking and he's saying, you know, it's like, yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, I believe it. And it was the only bit where I really felt like he embodied that character again.
Yeah, I just feel like and I also think that goes back to Levy or Levi, Sean Levi or Levy. Just used to the character, because the character doesn't do much in the movie at all, except run around with Ben Stiller because he's his sidekick. But it doesn't really nowhere show their relationship, you know, except for at that last moment. And I think that is the best part of the movie. But at the same time, I don't know if it was worth the hour and 15 minutes to see that scene either. It's a little bit too late. Too little too late.
Too little too late, yeah. It's the sort of thing I said in my review. If you've got kids, they're going to like it.
Yeah.
You know, they'll get a big kick out of it. If for no other reason to just see the monkey pee on two characters, you know.
Which is the exact reason why I wouldn't recommend go seeing it. You know. Different tastes, man. Different tastes.
Yeah.
Anyway, moving on. That is our, again, I'm sorry. Excuse me, Night at the Museum, Secret of the Tomb, where you could read Michael's review at mikesfilmtalk.com, and you could read our reviews at Chasing Cinema. Make sure to give this man a follow on Twitter and talk to him. He always talks to people talking about film. He loves it. Follow him on Twitter at mikesfilmtalk. You could read a bunch of his stuff also at the guardianlv.com. Moving on, now I'm going to talk about a movie that has been around for generations and generations, not so much in movie form, but from comic book strips or comic strips to radio to a bunch of different movies to poems, and that is the remake of Annie. Now, Michael, let's talk. Okay, so Annie has done radio and has done movies, most famously the 1982 film that starred Cara Burnett. You know, though there was many different variations. I know there was one that Disney made with Kathy Bates playing Miss Hannigan. Yes. I don't think I saw that, or at least don't remember it very detailed. How did you like the 1982 Annie?
I have never seen the entire whole film in one go.
Okay.
I have seen clips from it from other things. You know, in the UK, I'm guessing they do the same thing in this country. They'll do, you know, like top 20 musicals or top favorite bits in a musical or top favorite bits in a musical comedy. Mm-hmm. And, you know, and after a while, after so many, you can see almost the entire film.
Yeah.
I never have to watch it in chronological order. So I've seen most of it. And I've got to say that, and this is going into a little personal history here, my favorite version of It's a Hard Knock Life is not from either of the Annie films. It's actually in the Austin Powers film.
I knew that was coming.
Yeah, because we used to do this thing, and it's actually my fault. And okay, it's not bullying. The lads thought it was funny. When I was a prison officer, we'd get these little tiny short lads come up, and they would be all talking, you know, big, you know, I'm a big guy and all this, you know, really putting on the, you know, how tough they were. And I'd say, right, I'm not going to believe you unless you can give me 3 stanzas of It's a Hard Knock Life. So I would stand there and do It's a Hard Knock Life, you know, with all the gestures and everything from that. And it just, that's what I think of every time I hear that song. I think of Austin Powers, Goldmember in jail with little mini me doing the It's a Hard Knock Knife, you know, to be hotches, why not? You know, that whole bit. That's what I think about when I hear the song, not the original.
I absolutely adore the 1982 Annie. It was one of the films that we always had while I was growing up. I've mentioned it a lot recently on the podcast because I picked up the DVD and rewatched it, and there's something about that movie that I find very, very charming and very, very, just very enjoyable. It's a movie that can always put a smile on my face. Mostly because I am a huge fan of one of the greatest female comedians of all time, who is Carol Burnett, who plays Miss Hannigan in the film.
Which was what I was going to actually say, is the only performances I watched religiously on any program that showed them was the legendary, brilliant Carol Burnett as Ms. Hannigan.
And Carol Burnett is, you know, we don't even got to really have time. We would need plenty of podcasts to talk about how talented she was. You know, and we also have Tim Curry in the film and Bernadette Peters, who I also find absolutely hilarious, though her part is quite small in that movie. Yeah. But it is a movie that I've always enjoyed. I've always enjoyed the music to that film. So when I saw they were revamping Annie, I was all for it. I know it sparked a lot of controversy because that they were making Annie a black instead of white with red hair, which didn't bother me. And, you know, which again, me and Mike have talked about this when we were talking about Star Wars. It's silly, you know, movies are adaptations. Let them tell their own version of the story. Let people tell what they want to tell. Let people bring their creative stances and do what they want and just let them be. Though Sony would tell you different. So I had, you know, I mean, I was excited to see the revamped version. I knew it probably wasn't going to be as connected to me as the old 1992 version. But Michael, why don't you tell people what you thought of the new Annie, which was directed and written by Will Gluck?
Well, I will say that I kind of felt like Jamie Foxx was the modern-day version of Albert Finney. I didn't think Albert Finney fit the shoes of Daddy Warbucks very well when it was first done back in 82. I didn't feel like Jamie Foxx fit Will Stax either, you know, not in the way that it was believable that he was suddenly going to adopt this little kid. What I did like about the difference, and I do remember this much from the stage show and from the old original thing, was Annie's one of these kids that everybody likes and loves and adores, and she just gets really incredibly lucky. And that's how the whole thing is. She manages to melt the heart of this big millionaire who adopts her, blah, 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 and it's life's all roses, et cetera, et cetera. This Annie is a scrabbler. She's going to make her own luck. Now, she's cheeky, she's cute, she's funny, but she's also ready to stand up for herself.
Yeah, and in the very beginning of the film, she literally says it. She goes, "Luck's for suckers."
Exactly. She makes her own luck.
Yep.
And that's the main reason. And it never, apart from the fact that she says it at the beginning of the film, it never really comes across in the film that that's why she and Jamie Foxx get along so well. They don't work on that part of the relationship. And the reason for that is not because of the young lady playing Annie, but because of Jamie Foxx. The guy can do a lot of things. He can sing. He was a great Ray Charles. He was great in Django, but he never convinced me once that he was this multi-billionaire cell phone owner that was a hard fighter that got emotionally attached to this girl because he couldn't even cry. This is going back to Tropic Thunder. We can't do the scene because he can't cry. And that's exactly the problem we have with Jamie Foxx in this film. You'd have these scenes where you go, oh, it's dusty in here, or, oh, I've got a sinus condition.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't see any moisture, Jamie. Come on.
Yeah.
Somebody blow some menthol in the guy's eyes. Give him some moisture. It just never sold me. He didn't have the compassion. He was able to imitate kindness to a degree, but there were a lot of things about the film that did not work as well as the original from the clips that I've watched repeatedly. The bit where Cameron Diaz as Mrs. Hannigan decides to go with the guy that's going to make up the big plot in the middle. It was just things of it that didn't quite work for me. But then having said that, the other problem I'd had initially was the fact that Cameron Diaz was playing the part of Mrs. Hannigan. And I'm like, you can't replace Carol Burnett with Cameron Diaz. But then she did the little girl song. And she did it so well that everything about her character made sense by the end of the number. So I was like, okay, you know what? I kind of like you now. I kind of like you for this part. But not as much as I like the young lady that played the child support lady. Child services. I thought she would have made a brilliant Mrs. Hannigan. Much smaller part, but she had a really brilliant comedic timing. And she's got like a foreign sounding name. See if I can find her here.
Stephanie Kurtzuba.
That's it, yeah. And that to me sounds foreign. Kurtzuba. I thought she was just really brilliant out of everybody there. And I love Rose Byrne to death. I'd marry her in a minute, have her children, if I could. But the lady that really tickled me to death with her comic skills was this Stephanie Kurtzuba. Mm-hmm. I thought she was brilliant. Best thing in the film.
I also had, as I mentioned, the majority of the reason why I love the original film is because of the genius comedian that is Carol Burnett. And as many of you know, because you've been listening to this podcast, well, hopefully been listening to this podcast for 136 episodes, I am not a very big Cameron Diaz fan. And especially as of late, I'm just not a fan at all. And I don't mean to be mean. I don't mean to pick at her, but her performances to me have just been really weak. And when I heard that, I was like, all right, I was all with you until you went and said that. I was like, oof. And however, I think, well, one of the things, as me and Michael have talked about before, of course, because we talk so much, I mean, it's ridiculous how much we've gone back and forth about things. The best thing to do is when you're remaking something, in my opinion, is to go far left of it. Because you try to remake the same thing, you're going to fall on your face. So, though this movie was essentially very close to the original, and besides a few tweaks, Rooster isn't in this film. There's another, slime ball in the film that kind of, has a plot, as Michael said, and a few other things, and that we're in the world of modern technology. It is Mrs. Hannigan, who is quite different and not as harsh. Or Carol Burnett, though, was so funny. You didn't hate her, even though you could tell she was really terrible to these children and very mean and a very, very bad alcoholic. Where Cameron Diaz in this film, though they portrayed her as an alcoholic, never really came off as like a violent or vicious person or alcoholic. I thought that she was just kind of mean and always told kids to get out of her face, but it never felt like she really hated them. Or Miss Hannigan was so drunk she really couldn't hate them, but she did. Even though towards the end of the film she kind of changed her opinion, which is a little bit always like, it kind of happened quick.
Yeah.
This film, I think, which I will mention. So her backstory is that she was kicked out of CNC Music Factory before they went off, before they came out with Sweat, quote unquote, Everybody Dance Now. And to me, I thought that was genius. I'm a huge fan of CNC Music Factory. I really like that kind of just cheesy type stuff. And, and yes, music, And that whole storyline absolutely cracked me up. But as Michael said, when she sings Little Girls, she absolutely nails it. I mean, granted, if you watch Miss Hannigan, Carol Burnett do Little Girls, and she's pouring schnapps, I believe, in her tub and just hitting glasses and drinking out of the flower vase. That's stuff you can't recreate. No. But Cameron Diaz makes it very fun and interesting, and she does. They also make it a little bit more creative in how it actually looks, and little girls are just appearing everywhere. I really enjoyed that. Yeah. I thought it was very fun. It actually probably ended up being my favorite song in the new movie. My old favorite is I Think I'm Gonna Like It Here, which had a real, which was fun in this movie, and it also offers Michael's favorite performance out of this movie from the lady who's from the social services. Yes. But it didn't kind of have that same feel to me, but I really, really love Little Girls.
That was good.
Jamie Foxx, I didn't have much as a problem as Michael did with him, though I will agree in those scenes where he really needed to be emotional, he did lack. And, you know, he is someone that obviously can go above and beyond, and I don't know if he was just not caring enough to kind of bring out the tears or just what they didn't really want that to go that far. I don't know, but that was an issue. I didn't understand why this man, who is a very talented actor, not going that extra length. But I did feel a chemistry between them, though I felt most of it was carried by Wallace, who played young Annie. And she was absolutely wonderful in the movie. And though she... Okay, so we've the world has kind of discovered this actress from The Beasts of the Southern Wild, which was an independent film that came out 2-3 years ago, which was absolutely spectacular. She was phenomenal in it and really showed range for being such a young girl. In this movie, she plays more of a normal role that you would expect a child actor to get, and she plays it that way. However, there's one moment in particular when she finds out when she feels that not Daddy Warbucks, because he's Will Stacks in this movie. Did something, she believes he did something that absolutely crushes her, and the pain she expressed in her face literally broke my heart. She just totally loses all, you know, that grasp and spunk that she has throughout the movie. And I think that is like just a beautiful moment of her performance and wonderfully noteworthy.
And you don't doubt for a minute, not for one moment, that she's not feeling that. This kid really sold it. Yeah, she absolutely sold it. And as Michael said, I really love the fact that she was a go-getter and confident, and she, though, like, nothing was really down to luck because, you know, as the old Annie just so happens to kind of convince this lady to take her home to Daddy Warbucks, who didn't even know she was coming. In this film, when she meets Will Stacks, she's already negotiating. You need a few pictures. I need a little, you know, she's just such a go-getter. She's confident. And I think more or less, though, I don't think this is a spectacular film. I don't know if it'll last as long as the wonderful film from 1982. I think that this Annie is a good example for younger girls and just a good example for children to kind of see someone who's really a go-getter and really passionate. I think that kids, more younger kids will appreciate this movie, because I think even after a certain age, kids won't like the musical. The musical is an art that is kind of losing its touch. Obviously, it's not as prevalent, though I do feel that there have been musicals made, you know, Les Mis from 2 years ago or a year ago, absolutely phenomenal. But it's more becoming an adult. Well, it always has been an adult thing, you know, going back and back. But, you know, musical kid films, I think, are kind of going out further and further because we'll let it go. So maybe I'm kind of just arguing myself. I mean, Frozen. But anyway, I think this is... Yeah, but Frozen is animated. I mean, you know, you're looking at... There's live-action musicals, and really the last live-action musical that was aimed at children that was really good, that I know adults liked as well, was Bugsy.
Yeah. Okay.
And how long ago was that? Bugsy was brilliant, but I mean, Jodie Foster was still a kid, for crying out loud. Mm-hmm. You know, so it's like, a long time ago, mate.
So, yeah, I mean, I feel that it is going to have a certain demographic, depending on age and stuff. But I walked out of it with a smile. I know it wasn't the best rated film. I know it had its issues, but I still enjoyed watching it. So, anything else on Annie, Michael?
Better than Into the Woods.
And besides
just to throw that out there.
And besides that comment, you could hear more about that next week when we talk about Into the Woods. Because we definitely have a fair share to talk about Into the Woods, Disney's new musical film.
Yes.
Okay, we're getting down to the last two, but two that are definitely worth time to talk about. The first film we're going to talk about now, well, third, fourth film, whatever. I'm losing track.
One of many.
is by director Jean-Marc Vallée, who brought us Dallas Buyers Club last year, and tells the story of a woman named Cheryl Strayed who went on the Pacific Crest Trail, which is, I think, over 1,000-mile hike from Mexico to Canada, and that character is played by Reese Witherspoon. Now, I didn't know much about this film until I kind of got invites about it. I didn't see much of it advertised as much as I am now, as it's kind of getting closer and closer to the date. But it wasn't a movie that I've been hearing about and been waiting for. But yeah, Michael, why don't you tell us what you thought of Wild?
I actually really, really liked it. And I went into the film thinking I wasn't going to like it because I had seen everything we had gone to see this year. They kept showing clips from Wild. And they kept showing the same clip, which is the fox on the snowy trail and Reese Witherspoon howling at the moon. Not all in the same deal, obviously, but, that was the two clips they kept showing. And I was like, this is something I'm not going to like because I'm not a huge Reese Witherspoon fan. I'd seen her in The Good Lie, and she didn't impress me at all in that. And I was like, I'm not going to enjoy it. I'm not going to enjoy it because I just don't like the woman that much. Yeah. So I got in there, and lo and behold, surprise of all surprises, I fell in love with the woman. I was like, wow, you have actually done more than impress me. You've actually turned me into a fan. I had no idea you were that good. She really bowled me over. And even though I went in there with the idea that, you've just done this because it's, this is going to be your Oscar film, isn't it, darling? You've done this because you're going to get nominated for a golden statuette. It's the only reason why they made the film. The only reason why you made the film. So, that was the idea I had when I came in. But then actually watching it, by the end of it, I was like, okay, yeah, you deserve that little bald-headed gold chap. You really do. You've done a brilliant job. I loved her in it.
Well, we've also found out that Reese Witherspoon is quite the smart person when it comes to picking up books and going after them. As we learned, her production company also was the one that said, this film by Gillian Flynn is really good. We should make this into a movie. And lo and behold, one of the most popular movies of the year was Gone Girl. And not many people know Reese Witherspoon was a producer on that. Yeah. She also bought the rights to this movie, this book, which was called Wild, by the real Cheryl Strayed. This was a true story, as me and Michael talked about last week. A lot of the popular films this year are all real stories or based on true stories.
Based on true stories, yeah.
I honestly, like Michael, I've never been a big fan of Reese Witherspoon. It's not like I don't like her, but she's never kind of won me over. She's always kind of been that name that's always I'm like, oh yeah, that's Reese Witherspoon, but no one's someone that I've ever like, oh, Reese Witherspoon's in this. I got to see it.
Yeah.
Now, The Good Lie, Michael. Which one's that?
The Good Lie was the children from Nigeria. I say children. They're grown up by the time they finally get out of the country. They get sent over from war-torn Nigeria to the U.S. and she plays this woman that looks after them. Mm-hmm. And that received such a lackluster response in Las Vegas. As far as I know, it never even opened in this town.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't remember going to see it, but I remember that film coming out, and again, it was just I don't know. I didn't see that film, and I don't know if she did something else this year or a year before, but I feel like I haven't seen her in quite a while.
And she didn't do a lot in The Good Lie.
Yeah, no.
For as much as the marketing made it seem like it was a Reese Witherspoon film.
Yeah.
She had very little to do. It was really all about the Nigerians coming over. So it was a waste of time and effort for her, really.
Yeah. So, and I'm sure that I'm forgetting things, but I know a lot. I mean, the most things that come up with Reese Witherspoon's name is Legally Blonde and Legally Blonde 2 and Sweet Home Alabama, and these movies that I never really enjoyed. And I'm not saying that she only plays one type of character, because I know she has tried in the past to kind of do different things, such as The Good Lie, which I just unfortunately never saw. I'm sure there are movies that she
I liked it, actually.
But I do know that she was in Walk the Line, and she won an Oscar for it. Yeah. And truth be told, I've never seen Walk the Line. And as big as a fan of Joaquin Phoenix as I am, I should definitely watch it. My girlfriend has been trying to get me to watch it. And it just so happened to be during December. I'm like, I have so many movies to watch. The last thing I need to worry about is watching a movie that I don't need to watch right now.
Yeah,
But, she was also an American Psycho in a very small part. But she was in Mud, which was really good too. But again, nothing that I say, my favorite part of that's Reese Witherspoon. Well, in this film, it's kind of hard because it is all about Reese Witherspoon. Though Laura Dern is in it and has a pretty good role, this movie focuses on Reese Witherspoon, and I was so pleasantly shocked, as with Michael, on how wonderful she was. I really, really enjoyed this movie. It is a journey that is quite interesting because I expected it to be a certain way. I expected it to be similar to what it ended up being, but a lot lighter. So it went a bit darker than I had planned. In the opening titles, actually, there's a scene when there's like a scary little montage of when they show the term wild, where they show this character with I don't know. You can't really tell because it happens so fast, but some issues with their eyes or something. It's just really whoa. I was like, whoa, that's the first thing I said. I said, this looks like it's going to be a little bit creepy. But it does get very dark, and you learn a lot about Reese Witherspoon, and I think she really embodied that character. I think she totally deserves to be nominated for the Best Actress Award from the Academy Awards. If she's deserving of winning it, I'll kind of hold my tongue because we're going to be talking a lot about that in the next month. But I mean, wow. It's very rare that you actually get to go. I mean, we use the term journey a lot when we talk about going on with a character and things like that, but this is literally a journey that we kind of travel along with our character. And, a lot of people have referenced it to the film Into the Wild, which was a few years back with Emile Hirsch, which I also really loved. But I think Wild is a great, great film. Again, a very empowering film, though a very challenging movie at the same time. I do think it was one of the best movies I've seen all year, and I believe she delivered a great knockout performance.
I think so. And I think the writing on the entire thing, and it's funny because when I was looking at what we were doing earlier today on a different thing, I kind of left that out, and I probably shouldn't have done, and I feel quite guilty now. But the point is, all the characters in the film, which were all based upon, characters that this woman met in real life, because this is all based on a journal that she wrote, a diary of what went on during this walk and people she had met. And it had these wonderful character actors in there in small, little, tiny bits. And one of the ones was, and I'm going to get his name right this time. I got it wrong when I talked about this with somebody else the other day. W. Earl Brown has this little tiny part in there that he just comes across as so believable, like everyone else does in the film. You really go along with it. I will say I was gutted to see that suddenly Laura Dern has gotten old. This is a woman I've been in love with for years, and I'm like, oh my God, Laura Dern's got wrinkles? When did this happen? What's going on here? There is no God. What's wrong? I love Laura Dern. And she's suddenly gotten old. But this is from Reese Witherspoon impressed me so much because the other thing and the other reason why I've never really particularly liked Reese Witherspoon is she is the one person, you hear all the time about celebrities going, don't you know who I am? Mm-hmm. She is the one person that actually did that. And they caught it on film. Mm-hmm. She was being arrested by a state trooper and she did this haughty, don't you know who I am? Do you know who you're talking to? And I was like, yeah, okay, Reese. Yeah, and another reason why I didn't really particularly care for her because kind of up her own ass, obviously. Mm-hmm. But she'd been having a very stressy, bad day, supposedly. And she more than made up for it for her performance in this film. She made me 100% believe throughout that entire thing that she was not Reese Witherspoon. She was Cheryl Strayed.
Absolutely.
And everything she went through, from being frightened by things she'd come across in certain parts in the film, to being overwhelmed, to being angry, she just totally made me believe she was this woman. And I just total respect.
Absolutely. And I agree with you. She totally, like I said, embodied that character and delivered one of the best performances of the year, period, male or female. And I also really appreciated her chemistry with the other characters. I mean, it's small, but her chemistry with her brother, who's named Leaf, I believe his name is Keen McRae, I believe it's pronounced.
Keen McRae.
They had incredible chemistry. There's a scene when they are sharing a bed and the two begin to pray for their mom. And I mean, it's an incredible, powering scene. I thought it was one of the best scenes of the film. But also, more importantly, her chemistry with her mother, who played by Laura Dern. I mean, they had an incredible chemistry. At times it was beautiful and wonderful, but at times very heart-wrenching and very difficult to watch. I mean, just very heartfelt. I did see the film with someone who recently lost somebody, and they said it just kind of really, really hit home, and I could totally see why. I mean, this movie definitely seems like it's just could be very, very hard to watch. It's a very hitting home type film. It will touch you very emotionally, and it's very moving, but very empowering as well, as you see this girl try to, as she quote unquote says herself, she's going to walk herself back to the person that she thought she was.
Yeah. And all the characters are so real feeling.
Yes, absolutely.
You know, every single one of them. Laura Dern's character, Bobby, the mom, you felt like this was someone that you've known and have known for a long time. Mm-hmm. And for the short time she's in the film, you really get behind her. And when things do go the way you are really upset. Yeah. And it brilliant. Absolutely. I can't praise it enough. I think it's one of my favorite films of the year.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely. A great film. A very empowering film, for women and for people in general. And I think it was just a really, really well made film. Moving on to our last film of this podcast, as we have already probably talked for longer than an hour, at least of what we recorded, because me and Mike are already, talking for an hour before we
started. We talked for an hour before we got started, yeah.
Last film is a film that I've been waiting for and anticipating for as long as I could remember, and that is FOXCATCHER, which was directed by Bennett Miller, who brought us Capote and Moneyball. And this film tells the story of an Olympic wrestler who goes by the name of Mark Schultz. And his interaction with a man named John DuPont, who will actually wants to coach him and bring him to the 1988 Olympics. Film stars him, Mark Ruffalo, Channing Tatum, and Steve Carell. A movie that I saw the trailer for and saw the amazing transformation that Steve Carell went through, at least makeup and stuff-wise, and was like, I need to see this movie. This movie, I could tell, is going to be something I absolutely love. I absolutely love Capote, and I love Moneyball, so the fact that Bennett Miller was behind it also really excited me. So this has just been a long time coming. The film came out in November in most of the U.S., but just hit us on the 19th. So, Michael, how did you feel about FOXCATCHER?
I can say that beyond a shadow of a doubt, in one word, it was wow. Completely blew me away. It was also chilling. It was disturbing. And you and I have talked about Steve Carell before, mm-hmm. where we've seen him play parts, for example, in Little Miss Sunshine, where he was the only serious character out of the entire film, outside of Paul Dano. But the man proved then he could act. I saw him in this film, and I'm like, if you never do another comedy role, I'll be happy. Because you have proven beyond shadow of a doubt, Old Bean, that you have got the biggest chops of anybody I've seen in the industry recently. Yeah. He completely made me believe that he had all those issues that this character he portrayed had. And in fact, the whole film, I mean, I said it in my review that Channing Tatum also completely won me over with his portrayal of Mark Schultz. Mm-hmm. And for as little as Ruffalo is in the film, his portrayal of Dave Schultz is spot on as well. Yeah. There's scenes in there that don't last very long, but where you know exactly what's going through his head, why he's having these issues he's having, why he responds this way to certain things in just this one little tiny scene. You know the one I'm talking about, in front of the film camera. And it's like, wow. Yeah. That film kept me on the edge of my seat. And I had actually taken the time to look up a little bit of what got on. Not too much, because I wanted it to be more of a surprise. Mm-hmm. I didn't want to know too much about the story. And I knew just enough that it did keep me on edge, but I would have been on the edge of my seat anyway. Yeah. Because the interactions between these characters, before Ruffalo even comes on the scene, between Carell and Tatum were just like, you couldn't stop watching it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And you knew it was like, they have this saying in England, this will end in tears. This will end in tears. And the whole time I watched this, I kept thinking, this will end in tears. This will end in tears. Not going to be good at all. And it was absolutely brilliant film.
Wow. This is one of those cases, again, where I was expecting something, and it was a little bit different than I had expected. I knew the film was going to be a very tight thriller, very tragedy. I mean, you could tell in the trailer that something bad ended, and I unfortunately, to my just lack of research, didn't know the story of this film, this whole story before going into the film. But once I know a film's coming out to tell me that story, I do try to avoid it because I want to experience it as if any other story. Like, I don't want to know the ending of that. I'll go in and I really not know what's going to happen. And that, as Michael said, really kept me on the edge of my seat. Though, even if I did know, it wouldn't change anything because it's also a film where you are very aware, as Michael said, is something is going to happen. And I think the greatest thing about this film is that it has this feeling, this tone the entire time, where you are constantly biting your nails just waiting for these moments.
Yes.
Waiting for this thing to kind of happen. And it keeps you waiting. A perfect way I think to describe it is it gives you that feeling where most characters say, or people say, it's so quiet, it's too quiet.
Yes.
And, you were just waiting for something to happen, and it pins and needles. And though there are very climactic moments in the film, there is nothing like how the film wraps up.
Yeah.
And I think that, it's one of those movies that will also receive the criticism from most general audience that it's too slow. And I couldn't disagree more, because I think it's the film's pacing that makes makes it is because it makes you sit there, quote unquote, in this, well, not quote unquote, but in my scenario, sitting in that silence saying, okay, something's wrong here. What is it? And it makes you wait. And, and I don't care. The beginning, these two start interacting, it's like, wow, I could tell this is going to end in tears, as Mike would say.
Yeah.
As far as performance, it's really incredible when an actor can, really immerse himself in somebody and they become unrecognizable. Most of the most talented actors can do it even without makeup, which is especially impressive. But, Steve Carell is still pretty visibly Steve Carell with this makeup on, though he does look different. However, Steve Carell's not there. You cannot see Steve Carell. Steve Carell's not visible because that man really transformed himself into this cowardly,
paranoid, schizophrenic,
paranoid,
inarticulate,
very sad, very hurt person that I think his complexity was so perfectly performed by Carell.
Yeah.
The way we kind of portray crazy in most films are very, very one way and very unrealistic. And I think that, me and Michael got in the conversation about Steve Carell's character in the film, as well as who's crazier, him, or who would you rather be afraid of in a dark alley, him or Jake Gyllenhaal's character from Nightcrawler?
Yeah.
And, we could probably argue that for a while, but I think there's something about the unconfident and need to be accepted and wanting to be the spotlight of the conversation that's really just all of these things are embedded in this character, and though are never really said, though that sometimes the film implies, Steve Carell absolutely nails it and just delivers all of it. I mean, his character, though, is complex and difficult to understand, and someone that, probably isn't someone you could just have a conversation with and understand, he makes it transparent enough to where the audience can see through him. And that's a very powerful gift. And someone who just says, oh, it's the guy from The Office. It's the comedy. The 40-year-old virgin. For that guy to do it, that says something about him. That really does.
In this film, you can say in one sentence, Steve Carell has left the building.
Yes.
That character is not in there. That actor has gone, and he's inhabited it instead with John DuPont, this paranoid schizophrenic who had mother issues, who despite all the wealth in the world was inarticulate for all intents and purposes, did not know how to interact with other people, could not interact properly with other people. And that was the thing that was brilliant about the whole film. Vast majority of it was you had these two characters that were both equally inarticulate. They were both incapable of communicating on a normal level with another human being. Case in point, Channing Tatum as Mark Schultz giving the speech at the school to a bunch of young school children. One of the most awkward scenes in the entire world. And, you're sitting there going, and they paid him for that? It was like, oh, this is bad, And then later you see that, DuPont's got his own version of this where, he lets his money speak for him because he has to. And these two characters get together and have this relationship where, it's just not going to be good. So you spend the vast majority of this film waiting for the other shoe to drop. And the fact that Bennett is not at all bashful about using silence to help build up the uncomfortable feel of a scene. He doesn't use music to enhance it. He leaves it stone cold. So it's like you are a fly on the wall observing this really uncomfortable scene.
Yeah. And, and I think that Miller also has this incredible talent of following characters that are really in search or in need of something.
Yes.
Where we find that Carell's character, DuPont, is in search of a friend. And there's that really heartbreaking scene when he talks about the only friend he ever had as a child was paid by his mom.
Yes.
And that's a very powerful scene, though very subtle. I mean, if you're not really watching him as a character, you're not going to catch that emotion from him because it is kind of said in passing.
Yeah.
And then we have this character who's just searching for a father figure, someone to kind of be there for him and support him. And then, these two find each other and, you kind of learn that maybe the things that you're looking for aren't always the best thing for you. And I mean, wow, and it's incredible. And I really want to talk about Mark Ruffalo because, as Michael said, Mark Ruffalo isn't in the majority of the picture. But he is definitely a co-star and someone that I think really, really delivered. And to me, I think even made more an impression on me than Channing Tatum. Though I will say Channing Tatum did a great job and he was very, very wonderful in his role. I think Mark Ruffalo impressed me a little bit more and made more of an impact on me just because of how he addressed situations and how you kind of learn more about him. I think every character in this film, especially the main three, spoke volumes and had very complex characters that were all illustrated for the audience perfectly. I mean, FOXCATCHER, again, we don't mean to sound repetitive, but it's just a great year that it's one of the best films of the year with some of the greatest performances of the year. I mean, absolutely a knockout of the park.
And it's that thing that I want to point out is Ruffalo's character, Dave Schultz, is a presence in the film, even when he's not on camera.
Absolutely.
Because it's made very apparent from the very get-go that DuPont didn't just want Mark Schultz. He wanted the brothers. He wanted both of them.
Yep.
And for that reason, just on its own, Ruffalo's character is a constant presence in the background. And it's also there in the fact that, as you were just saying, the younger brother was desperately in search of a father figure. Mm-hmm. Someone to take that place. He had someone, but as you see in the beginning of the film, he slightly resents him a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's like he wants it, but he doesn't want it. So, it gets that added layer, but throughout the whole thing of him trying to bond or bonding with DuPont, you still got Ruffalo in the background. He's still this presence that is going to pop up sooner or later, even if you don't know the story, because you feel like he's going to show up. Mm-hmm. And it was just done so well. And you see the differences between the two. And the one line, and it's the only line I'll quote from the film, where DuPont's trying to completely win over Mark, and he goes, "You're always going to be under the shadow of your brother. You're never going to be able to do what you want to do as long as he's around." Yeah. And you get the feeling that, Dave is the one that he's got everything together. Yeah. He's the brother that got everything. The old joke used to be, he's the brother that got all the good stuff from mom and dad, and the other guys are the one that got what was left over. But yeah, that's exactly the way it came across.
And another thing I think, it's not so much a Moneyball, but especially in this and kind of Capote, that Bennett has an incredible way of not doing things so black and white and not villainizing. Is that the right word I'm using here? Vilifying. Thank you. Vilifying one character and and putting another character as a victim. I mean, it's very much a level ground, and they're just people.
Yeah.
People that have issues and have problems. Some more obviously less intact than others. But I mean, there's no villain in this movie. Though, I mean, you could argue there is, but everyone just kind of seems like they are all on level ground besides the issues that they carry. And it's not black and white. It's very gray. And I think that's one of the most incredible aspects of a Miller film. And like I said, I can't speak enough good about this picture. A very, very fascinating, slow. And, in the film, DuPont, I was thinking about this because Hitchcock was a very, very, a director fascinated with birds, and birds was a constant motif in a lot of his films. And DuPont makes a lot of comments about bird watching. He wrote a book about bird watching, and it kind of has that feel. Though I've never been bird watching, but I could imagine that the film is very symbolic to just the whole theory of just sitting, watching, and waiting, and waiting, and waiting. And you have to have that patience for that payoff. And I think that is exactly the point of the movie, is just to sit there and wait, and you'll see something. Well, I don't want to say that you want to see, but you'll see something, especially.
Yeah.
And I really just think that Miller knocked it out of the park in this movie.
I think so. I mean, there have been arguments. I read somewhere the other day that someone was complaining. Okay, true. DuPont was much worse in real life than he is actually depicted in the film. Mm-hmm. He was nutso for a lot more portion than what actually transpires. And the time period between when things fall apart here and the climax of the film is actually about 7 years. And that's never been made apparent in the film. You don't realize that much time has gone past. It actually looks like it happened just bang, bang, like that. But it didn't. And again, another thing that was different, but I liked the way he did it. Before the tail end of the film, when everything all comes up, there's a scene where he's going to his house, and he's done odd things inside his house, and it just looks weird. And when you read what really happens afterwards, it sort of makes sense that that's why Bennett Miller put that scene in there, to try and show that. Yeah. But it doesn't show the year time period. But I don't think you needed that in there.
Yeah. I mean, for someone who didn't follow the story, I think it told it very well. Granted, yes. I should probably now that I've seen the film, go and kind of read exactly what happened. And I know that a lot of those videos that they were making are on YouTube, and I want to watch those now. But I'm trying to think of what I was going to say. I kind of lost my train of thought. I'm sorry, I lost where I was going.
It was probably my fault. No. About that other stuff.
No, because I interrupted you. So but either way, a great film. 7 years. Wow.
It was actually a really long time period. Yeah, I didn't realize that. Because the first thing I did, I have a tendency. I remember reading this a long time ago. Stephen King actually pointed it out, and I agree. When you see a film that is based on a true story, the very fact that they made it into a film fictionalizes the story.
Yeah, absolutely.
For example, we know there were movie cameras there, doing the interviews with these people, but there's no movie camera there the day that Mark Ruffalo was shot, repeatedly by John DuPont. It wasn't caught for posterity for us to look at and say, yes, that really happened. So the very act of filming an event that was really happening fictionalizes it. Mm-hmm. Because we weren't there. We don't know. We can only fill in the blanks as we want. And in fact, one of my pet peeves about factual films is when people take poetic license and there'll be a bit in the film that nobody knows what happened, so they'll make something up, to make it fit. Yeah. It's like, don't do that. Just don't show that bit. Don't fictionalize it even more.
Yeah.
And what I think Bennett Miller did with this was he stuck to the bits that were well documented.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you look at that 7-year time period between when Schultz departs, the first one Schultz leaves and the other Schultz comes in and whatever, a lot of it's secondhand knowledge, a lot of it's secondhand stories. Nothing was caught by the main people that are portrayed in the film. Nobody says anything about it. Because this is a guy that thought he was being, what was it? I want to say he thought he was being spied on by Nazis. And aliens and something else really odd. He was really off in left field. But this is also a man that they don't show up very often in the film either. He drank an incredible amount, was using a lot of pharmaceuticals. So there you go.
Yeah, and I also think this movie is a film that surprisingly some people laughed at more than I thought, and I thought they were kind of laughing at parts I didn't think were necessarily funny. Yeah. I think there are a few comedic moments in the movie that are kind of well put, but it's one of those movies where I don't think people were laughing so much because they thought it was funny, but just how uncomfortable it made them feel.
Laughter.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's also something Bette Midler has incredibly done well, is that he could literally put you in that situation where you have no idea what to do except chuckle.
Yeah, yeah.
But overall, wonderful film. Make sure to read Mike's review at mikesfilmtalk.com. You can read more from him at theguardianlv.com. And, of course, read all of his things and see what he's doing and see what he's talking about on his Twitter at mikesfilmtalk. You can read all of our reviews for the films that we've just covered at chasingcinema.com. All are going to be on the homepage. You can see them all on Facebook as well, facebook.com/chasingcinema. And, of course, watch our video reviews, and where you can also listen to more of our podcasts at youtube.com/chasingcinema. Next week, me and Michael will be joined by the Las Vegas Weekly's own Josh Bell, who's famously for quote-unquote hating everything. He's been on the podcast multiple times, and me and him have seemed not to agree so much on films, but he is a great guy, great friend, and love to have him on. So we're going to be talking about the films that are coming out on Christmas, which originally was 6 films, but I believe is only 5 now, and that is Selma, The Imitation Game, Into the Woods, Unbroken, and Big Eyes. So we're going to be talking about all 5 of those films next week. Thank you so much for listening to our podcast. Make sure to hit the subscribe button on our iTunes channel so you make sure you could hear us every week. Michael, thanks so much for coming back on.
Thank you for having me again.
And please continue chasing cinema.